Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to do something a little different. We're diving deep into the legacy of the Night of the Living Dead franchise.
Ooh,
We've got articles, essays, even some behind-the-scenes stuff.
sounds good.
And our mission is to uncover why this story, which started with a super low-budget film way back in 1968,
Yeah.
still has such a grip on us, even today in 2024.
You know what's really fascinating about Night of the Living Dead is that it goes so far beyond just horror. Like, we're going to look at its cultural impact and how it reflects these sort of changing anxieties that we have.
Right.
And why those themes resonate even more strongly now in the 21st century.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning.
Yeah.
1968, George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead.
Classic.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are familiar with the film, but
Sure.
looking through these sources, what really struck me was just how groundbreaking it was for its time.
Mm.
It was made on a budget of just over $100,000,
Wow.
and it ended up grossing over $30 million worldwide.
It really was a game changer. And, Romero's vision of the zombie wasn't rooted in voodoo or the supernatural. Like, all the stories that came before,
Right, yeah.
he, redefined it. These were flesh-eating, instinct-driven ghouls.
Right.
And it was that relentless pursuit of the living that just made them so terrifying.
And you can't underestimate the impact of those stark black and white visuals.
Yeah.
I mean, this was 1968.
Yeah.
Color was becoming the norm, but Romero chose to go black and white.
Oh, yeah.
And it added this whole other layer of dread and realism to it.
Absolutely. And then there's the casting of Dwayne Jones as Ben, the lead character.
Yeah.
To have a black actor leading a horror film in the middle of the civil rights era was a huge deal.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just about representation. It
Yeah.
added this whole other layer of subtext to the film's themes of societal collapse and survival.
Some of the sources argue that while Romero may not have explicitly set out to make a film about race,
Yeah.
the casting of Jones and the way his character navigates this increasingly hostile world makes it impossible to ignore the racial dynamics at play.
I'd agree with that. Whether intentional or not, Ben's struggle for survival becomes a powerful metaphor for the Black experience in America, particularly during a time of immense social and political upheaval.
Now, Romero didn't stop at Night of the Living Dead. He continued to explore these societal anxieties through his sequels.
Yeah.
In Dawn of the Dead, he shifts the setting to a shopping mall,
Oh, yeah.
and it becomes this biting satire on consumerism.
It's fascinating how relevant that film remains today. You could argue that our current obsession with online shopping and the frenzy of Black Friday sales,
Yeah.
it's all a manifestation of the same consumerist impulses that Romero was satirizing back in the 70s.
It's like we're trapped in this endless loop of consuming, even in the face of a zombie apocalypse.
Precisely. And then you have Day of the Dead, which takes an even darker turn. This time, Romero focuses on the military-industrial complex and how the pursuit of power and control can ultimately dehumanize us. We see scientists experimenting on zombies and the military becoming increasingly authoritarian.
Right.
And it's a really bleak outlook on human nature under pressure.
And it's not just the military, it's the scientists, too, convinced they can somehow control these creatures. Like they're trying to bend nature to their will.
Right.
For those who might not be familiar, the military-industrial complex
Yeah.
refers to the close relationship between the government, the military, and the arms industry.
Right.
It's this idea that there's a vested interest in perpetuating conflict and militarization,
Yeah.
and Romero uses Day of the Dead to really dissect that dynamic.
Yeah, and it makes you think about how that complex operates today, especially in light of, recent events. Like, Romero was tapping into something that sadly has become even more relevant in the 21st century.
Then there's Land of the Dead, which came out in 2005, and here Romero tackles class division head-on. We have this walled city where the wealthy live in luxury protected from the zombie hordes, and the poor are left to fend for themselves outside the walls. It's a really blatant commentary on the growing gap between the rich and the poor.
Yeah.
And again, you can draw some pretty clear parallels to current discussions about wealth inequality and the lack of social mobility.
It's a recurring theme throughout history, isn't it? Those with power and resources often isolate themselves, creating systems that benefit them,
Right.
while leaving the less fortunate to struggle.
Romero seems to be suggesting that even in the face of a zombie apocalypse, these social hierarchies remain deeply ingrained. Now he takes a completely different approach, with Diary of the Dead going for that found footage style.
Oh, yeah. This one's especially interesting because it directly critiques how media manipulates and sensationalizes events.
Right.
We see a characters filming everything, even in the most dire circumstances.
Right.
And it becomes this commentary on our obsession with documentation and how it can distort our understanding of reality.
This was 2007, just as social media was starting to explode. It's almost prophetic how Romero anticipated the way we consume information today. The constant bombardment of images and videos, often without any context or critical analysis.
It raises the question, doesn't it? Are we becoming so desensitized to violence and suffering because of this constant exposure to graphic content?
Okay, before we go any further, let's talk about John Russo Romero's co-writer on the original Night of the Living Dead. It turns out Russo retained the rights to the Living Dead title, which led to this whole other branch of the franchise.
Oh, wow.
It gets a little complicated, but it's important to understand how these two branches diverged.
It's a fascinating example of how copyright law can just shape creative output. Russo's Return of the Living Dead took the zombie concept in a completely different direction. These zombies were more comedic, craving brains instead of just flesh.
Right.
And they had this punk rock energy that was a far cry from Romero's bleak realism.
And it worked. Return of the Living Dead became a cult classic in its own right, spawning a series of sequels that embraced that campy, over-the-top humor of the original.
It demonstrates the malleability of the zombie as a storytelling device. It can be a vehicle for serious social commentary, as in Romero's films, or it can be used for pure entertainment with a healthy dose of humor and gore.
But here's where it gets really wild. The original Night of the Living Dead actually fell into the public domain because of a copyright error.
That's right. A simple oversight in the copyright notice meant that anyone could adapt, remake, or reinterpret the film without needing permission or paying royalties.
Talk about a gift to aspiring filmmakers.
It certainly opened the floodgates. We got the 1990 remake, which tried to stay true to the spirit of the original while updating the effects and adding a few new twists.
Yeah.
Then there was Night of the Animated Dead in 2021, which reimagined the story and animation.
Right.
And even Night of the Living Dead 3D, which, well...
Let's just say it was a unique interpretation. But putting aside the quality of some of these adaptations, what's really interesting is how the public domain status of the original film has allowed for this incredible proliferation of reinterpretations. It's a testament to the enduring power of the source material.
It's a double-edged sword, though, isn't it? On the one hand, it allows for creative freedom and accessibility, giving new voices the chance to engage with the material.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it raises questions about artistic ownership and the potential for exploitation.
Yeah, it's a tricky issue.
Yeah.
But regardless of the copyright situation, there's no denying that Romero's vision fundamentally changed the zombie genre.
I agree.
He moved away from those voodoo-inspired origins and presented the zombie as a product of science or perhaps some unexplained phenomena,
Right.
which opened up a whole new set of possibilities for storytelling.
Exactly. He laid the groundwork for modern zombie classics like The Walking Dead 28 Days Later and World War Z.
Right.
Each of these works, while building on Romero's foundation, has added its own unique twist to the genre.
The Walking Dead, for example, with its focus on the long-term survival of a group of survivors, really delves into the interpersonal relationships and the moral dilemmas that arise when society breaks down.
And 28 Days Later introduced the concept of fast zombies, completely changing the pace and intensity of the genre. It's not just about surviving the night anymore, it's about outrunning these incredibly agile and aggressive creatures.
And then you have World War Z, which takes a more global, almost geopolitical approach to the zombie apocalypse. It's not just about isolated pockets of survivors. It's about the collapse of entire nations and the struggle to contain a pandemic on a global scale.
It's amazing how these different interpretations all stem from that same seed planted by Romero back in 1968.
And through it all, there's this recurring theme. The zombies themselves are never the true villains.
Right.
They're a catalyst, a force that exposes the flaws and contradictions of human society.
Precisely. They strip away the veneer of civilization, forcing us to confront our own mortality and the choices we make when faced with unimaginable horrors.
It's almost as if the zombies themselves are a blank canvas onto which we can project our fears, anxieties, and criticisms of the world around us.
That's a brilliant way to put it. They are a reflection of ourselves, distorted and grotesque, but ultimately a reminder of our own capacity for both good and evil.
So we've talked about how Romero's vision shaped the zombie genre. But I'm curious, what do you think it is about zombies specifically that continues to resonate with audiences, even today? I mean, there are countless monsters out there,
Yeah?
but zombies seem to hold this special place in our cultural imagination.
That's a great question. I think part of it has to do with their relentless nature.
Okay.
Zombies never stop. They're driven by this primal hunger,
Right.
this single-minded pursuit of the living.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just their physical persistence, it's the idea that they represent something unstoppable, something that can't be reasoned with or bargained with.
That's interesting. It's almost like they embody this fear of the unknown,
Exactly.
of something that's beyond our comprehension and control.
They tap into that primal fear of death and decay, the idea that our bodies are fragile,
Right.
that we're all just one step away from becoming these mindless, shambling creatures.
And yet, they're also strangely familiar, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, they were once human, and there's something unsettling about seeing that humanity stripped away,
Right.
leaving behind this empty shell.
That familiarity, that sense of recognition is what makes them truly terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
They're not some alien creature from another planet. They're a distorted reflection of ourselves,
Right.
a reminder of our own mortality and the fragility of our civilization.
You mentioned earlier that zombies are often used as a metaphor for societal anxieties.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that? What specific fears or anxieties do you think they represent?
Well, it depends on the context, of course.
Right.
But I think one of the most common themes is the fear of societal collapse.
Okay.
The idea that the structures and systems we rely on could crumble at any moment, leaving us vulnerable and exposed.
So the zombies represent chaos.
Yeah.
The breakdown of order.
In a way, yes, they represent the forces that threaten to unravel our carefully constructed world.
Right.
Whether it's a pandemic, an economic meltdown, or some other catastrophic event.
And in those situations, it's often our own fellow humans who pose the greatest threat.
Absolutely.
I mean, we see this time and again in zombie films.
Right.
The survivors turning on each other, fighting over resources, becoming as savage as the undead they're trying to escape.
That's a crucial point. The true horror in many zombie narratives isn't the zombies themselves,
Yeah.
but the darkness that emerges within humanity when pushed to the brink. It's that loss of empathy, that willingness to sacrifice others for self-preservation that's truly chilling.
But isn't there also an element of hope in some of these stories?
Yeah.
I'm thinking to The Walking Dead, for example, where despite all the loss and hardship, there are characters who cling to their humanity, who strive to rebuild some semblance of community.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
not all doom and gloom.
Yeah.
Even in the darkest of times, there are always those who choose to hold on to their values. Right.
To protect the vulnerable and to seek out connection and meaning. And that's what makes these stories so compelling.
Right.
They offer a glimpse into both the best and worst aspects of human nature.
So the zombies are a test in a way.
Yeah.
They force us to confront our own values and to decide who we want to be in the face of adversity.
Precisely. And I think that's why they continue to resonate with audiences. Because deep down, we all wonder how we would react in a similar situation. Would we succumb to fear and selfishness, or would we rise to the occasion demonstrating courage, compassion, and resilience?
That's a pretty profound question to ponder.
Huh.
Now, I want to shift gears for a moment and talk about the cultural impact of Night of the Living Dead. We've touched on this briefly,
Sure.
but it's worth exploring in more detail. What's fascinating to me is how this one film has seeped into so many different aspects of our culture.
It's really remarkable. You see its influence in music literature, video games, even fashion. It's like those zombies have clawed their way out of the screen and into every corner of our collective imagination. Could you give us some specific examples?
Well, in music, you have bands like The Misfits and Anthrax who've incorporated zombie themes into their lyrics and imagery.
Oh, okay.
There's a whole subgenre of punk and metal music that draws inspiration from the aesthetic and the themes of zombie films.
And then there's the world of literature, which is overflowing with zombie novels and graphic novels.
Oh, yeah.
Max Brooks's World War Z, for instance, takes a very different approach to the genre, offering this almost journalistic account of a global zombie pandemic. It's a fascinating read.
And it became a blockbuster film starring Brad Pitt, no less.
Exactly. But the literary world also offers more introspective takes on the genre,
Right.
like Colson Whitehead's Zone 1, which uses the zombie apocalypse as a backdrop to explore themes of lost memory and the struggle to rebuild society.
It's interesting how these stories can shift between pure entertainment and these deeper, more philosophical explorations of human nature.
Yep.
And then you have the world of video games, which has fully embraced the zombie apocalypse. Games like Resident Evil and The Last of Us have created these immersive, terrifying worlds where players must fight for survival against hordes of the undead.
Those games are incredibly popular, and they often delve into some pretty complex themes like the ethics of survival, the nature of humanity,
Right.
and the psychological toll of living in a constant state of fear.
And let's not forget the visual arts. There are countless artists who've been inspired by the imagery of Night of the Living Dead, creating paintings, sculptures, and installations that explore the themes of decay, transformation, and the monstrous.
It's amazing to think about how this one film, made on such a shoestring budget, has had such a profound and lasting impact on our culture.
It speaks to the power of a truly original vision. Romero tapped into something primal, something that continues to fascinate and terrify us even decades later. And as we've seen, the zombie is more than just a monster. It's a blank slate, a canvas onto which we can project our fears, anxieties, and social critiques.
But why do you think that is? Why do we keep returning to these stories of the undead? What is it about zombies that allows for such diverse and nuanced explorations of the human condition?
I think it's because, at their core, zombies represent a loss of control. They embody this primal fear of being overtaken by something outside ourselves.
Okay.
Something that strips away our individuality and reduces us to our most basic instincts.
That loss of control can be terrifying, but it can also be liberating, can't it?
It can.
I mean, in a world overrun by zombies, all bets are off. Social norms collapse, hierarchies crumble.
Right.
And it becomes this ultimate test of survival, forcing us to confront our deepest fears and to make difficult choices. It's almost like the zombie apocalypse offers this blank slate, this opportunity to reimagine society, to question the rules and the structures that we just take for granted.
It's a chance to explore what it truly means to be human. Examine those choices we make when faced with extreme circumstances and how we might rebuild a better world from the ashes of the old one.
It's a powerful concept, and it's no wonder that the zombie genre has become such fertile ground for social commentary.
Yeah.
We see it in films like Train to Busan,
Oh, yeah.
which uses that zombie outbreak as a metaphor for class inequality and social injustice in South Korea.
And in The Girl with All the Gifts, we see a different take on the zombie mythos, exploring themes of empathy and compassion and the possibility of coexistence between humans and the infected.
It's fascinating how these stories can be both horrifying and hopeful,
Right.
terrifying and thought-provoking. They force us to confront those darkest aspects of human nature, but also remind us of our capacity for kindness, courage, and innovation.
It's that duality, that tension between hope and despair that makes the zombie genre so compelling. It's not just about mindless monsters and buckets of gore.
Right.
It's about exploring what it means to be alive in a world that's constantly threatening to consume us.
Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to touch on something we haven't discussed yet. The future of the Night of the Living Dead franchise itself. With Romero's passing, there's been a lot of speculation about what will happen to his legacy.
There's certainly a lot of interest in continuing the story, Twilight of the Dead. The film based on Romero's final script is currently in development, and there's a lot of anticipation to see how it concludes his vision.
I'm curious, do you think there's a risk that these new interpretations without Romero at the helm might lose sight of the social commentary that was so central to his work?
It's definitely a valid concern. Romero had such a unique voice and a clear understanding of how to use the zombie genre to explore those complex social and political issues.
But there's also an opportunity, isn't there?
Yeah.
For new filmmakers to kind of build on his legacy, to bring fresh perspectives and interpretations to the genre.
Absolutely. And I think it's crucial that we allow for that evolution, that we encourage new voices to engage with the zombie mythos and to use it as a tool for exploring the issues that resonate with them.
So the zombies will continue to shamble on reflecting our changing anxieties and inspiring new generations of storytellers.
Indeed. The zombie as a cultural icon is here to stay. It's a malleable metaphor capable of adapting to the times and reflecting the fears, hopes, and dreams of each generation.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the Night of the Living Dead franchise. We've covered a lot of ground, from that groundbreaking original film to its lasting impact on popular culture and its potential for future interpretations.
It's been a fascinating journey exploring the evolution of this iconic horror series and its enduring power to captivate and challenge audiences.
We've seen how Romero's vision redefined the zombie genre and how his films explored those really profound social and political issues.
Yeah.
And how the franchise continues to inspire new generations of filmmakers and artists.
And most importantly, we discussed how the zombie as a cultural symbol reflects our deepest fears and anxieties, forcing us to confront the darkness within ourselves and to consider what it truly means to be human in a world that's constantly threatening to consume us.
If you've enjoyed this deep dive and you have any thoughts or reflections on what we've discussed, feel free to share them online using the hashtag #LivingDeadLegacy. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep those brains sharp and those doors locked. All right, let's do this. We're diving deep into Resident Evil today.
Awesome.
For everyone listening, you're obviously here because you love this franchise as much as we do. And let me tell you, we've got so much to cover.
We do.
From the very first game all the way to the movies, the shows,
The books.
the comics, everything.
That's crazy.
It's crazy how far this thing has reached, right?
It really is.
And I think a lot of people might not realize this, but did you know that
What's that?
in Japan, it's not even called Resident Evil. It's called Biohazard.
Oh, that's right.
We're going to get into that and a whole lot more, like how this thing started as like a slow burn, puzzle horror game, and then later on became more of like an action.
Action-y.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's really interesting how the first game, like back in 1996, really kind of changed survival horror. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't just like jump scares. It was like this feeling of dread that they built through the mechanics of the game.
Oh, for sure. Those fixed camera angles, I think that was like, that got under everybody's skin.
Totally.
You never knew what was coming.
Yeah.
And the limited inventory, oh my gosh, that every decision was like, ugh, should I keep this healing herb or
I need more ammo.
Yeah, they really, like, the limited inventory and the tank controls, the way you move.
Yeah.
That was all intentional to make you feel more vulnerable. Like, you're not this action hero. You're just a normal person.
Right.
Trapped in this nightmare trying to get out. And don't forget the sound design.
Oh, yeah.
The music, the lack of music sometimes. And the sound effects were all just
masterful.
Yeah. And of course, where did all this take place?
In a mansion.
In a spooky mansion.
It's a mansion.
Yeah.
I love that, like, the settings in these games are so iconic.
It's not just a backdrop. The Spencer Mansion is like, it feels like a character,
It really does.
With all the secrets and the traps and just the whole atmosphere of it. Still to this day, thinking about it.
Gives me chills.
Oh, yeah.
So the mansion and then the whole mystery around Umbrella, right?
Oh, yeah.
This pharmaceutical giant that's doing all this shady stuff. Bioweapons. I mean, that's where the T-virus comes from.
Yeah.
And those iconic zombies.
Yeah, those early zombies were terrifying, man. Like, I was like a little kid. I was like hiding behind the couch when I was playing those games. Yeah. But speaking of, we've talked about the zombies, the T-virus, the setting, the atmosphere. But the gameplay, I think, has gone through some major changes, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's evolved a lot.
And it still manages to, stay true to that survival horror, but
in different ways.
Yeah, in different ways, yeah.
So you can kind of break down Resident Evil's gameplay into like 3 phases. So you got like the early games, right? Like the first one, you got Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, Nemesis, Code Veronica, all these, they're classic survival horror. It's all about managing your items, solving puzzles, really tense, slow-paced. And then things kind of shifted.
Yeah, Resident Evil 4, I remember it was pretty revolutionary at the time.
Yeah, Resident Evil 4.
A lot of people were kind of surprised by it, but I think it really worked.
Yeah, it kind of changed things. The over-the-shoulder camera was new for the series, and that changed how the combat felt, made things faster. But it still had those Resident Evil vibes,
Yeah.
It still had the creepy atmosphere, the setting, Leon going through rural Spain, fighting these these villagers encountering the merchant.
Yeah.
Really unique. And then more recently, things changed again.
Yeah. With Resident Evil 7 and Village.
It's a Village.
It was like going back to the roots of survival horror.
Yeah.
But with a modern kind of
First person.
Yeah. It was scary, man. I'll never forget those encounters in Resident Evil 7 with that family.
Oh, the bakers.
The big.
They're scary.
Yeah.
But yeah, the first person view in RE7, that was brilliant.
Yeah.
It made everything so immersive and scary. And then Village just kind of built on that.
Yeah.
Brought in like gothic horror elements.
Yeah, with Lady Dimitrescu and all that.
Oh, wolves.
Yeah, yeah. So through all those changes, though, there are some things that stay true that keep you coming back to Resident Evil.
Oh, yeah. There's definitely common threads, I would say. What do you think?
Well, I think you always have Umbrella, lurking in the background.
Yeah.
Like the big bad.
The big bad.
Of the whole franchise.
Yeah.
You always know that they're somehow responsible for the things that are going wrong.
It makes you think, right?
Yes.
About corporations in real life and unchecked power and what are the consequences of that?
Yeah. It's kind of like a cautionary tale.
For sure. And you got those amazing characters, right?
Yeah.
You got Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, Leon Kennedy, Claire Redfield.
Oh, Claire.
Yeah. Each one has their own personality, their own skills, their own story, but they're all tough,
They're all survivors, yeah.
Survivors. You can't help but root for them.
Yeah. And then, of course, it wouldn't be Resident Evil without the crazy viruses and mutations.
Oh, the viruses.
And it's not just zombies. It's gone way beyond that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, everyone knows the T virus. That's your classic zombies.
Right, yeah.
But then you got the G virus, which makes those grotesque mutating creatures.
Oh, yeah.
And then Las Plagas,
Oh, yeah.
which are these parasites that control your mind.
Yeah, that was a trip.
That's freaky. And then the mold from RE7, it's like this sentient fungus.
Oh, yeah.
Can infect people and take them over.
I think they've done a really good job of, like, almost every game, they come up with something new and terrifying.
They keep it fresh. Keeps you guessing.
Yeah, totally. So speaking of the games themselves, let's talk about some of the ones that really stand out. What would you say is, like, if someone was just getting into Resident Evil, where would they start?
Oh, I always think Resident Evil 2 is a good place to start.
Okay, yeah.
It's a classic, right? Raccoon City, you got the police station, you got the sewers. The liquors.
Oh, those liquors, man.
It's a game that people still talk about today. And the remake in 2019, it brought it to a modern audience, and it proved that those old games, they can still be scary.
They hold up?
Yeah, absolutely. But of course you can't talk about, like, changing things up without talking about Resident Evil 4.
Yeah, it's a fan favorite.
A fan favorite. It really, like, kind of blended action and horror in a new way. The over-the-shoulder camera, those intense fights, that creepy merchant guy.
Oh, a merchant.
In the setting, like rural Spain. Who would have thought that would be so scary?
Yeah. And then, of course, we have to talk about Resident Evil 7, because I feel like that was like a big deal.
It brought it back to its roots.
Yeah.
Went back to that classic survival horror feel, but, with a modern twist. The first-person view just put you right in the middle of it. The Baker family house. Oh, my God.
A Baker family house.
It's a great game.
It was so creepy.
He's so creepy.
Yeah. And then Village kind of continues on with Ethan Winters and goes in a little bit of a different direction.
Yeah.
But it still works.
It still works.
I think it's a really good example of how they can do different, styles of horror within Resident Evil, but still make it feel like a Resident Evil game.
Exactly. It still has that DNA,
Yeah. But, it's not just games. Right?
Oh, no way.
It's
movies.
It's movies.
It's animated films.
TV shows.
It's everywhere.
It's crazy how this thing is just blown up into so many different...
It's wild.
Yeah, forms of media. So let's talk about some of that, because we've got a lot to unpack there.
We do.
Get ready for some Hollywood action and some really spooky animation, because we're going to the big screen and the small screen next.
Go. All right, so let's talk about those live action movies first.
Okay, yeah.
The ones with Mila Jovovich.
Oh, yeah.
She plays this character named Alice.
Alice, yeah. They were They were big. They were everywhere.
They were huge.
Yeah.
Everyone was talking about them.
I remember I thought Alice was so cool.
Yeah.
Just a badass.
Kicking on all those zombies.
Yeah, yeah. They were definitely more action-packed
Oh, yeah, definitely.
in the games.
Yeah, they kind of did their own thing with the story.
Yeah, they veered off a little bit.
They did, yeah. They introduced new characters, new storylines.
All right.
But, even though they weren't always, critically acclaimed, people loved them.
People loved them, yeah.
They loved seeing those Resident Evil monsters up on the big screen.
Yeah.
And the action was pretty awesome.
The action was great, yeah.
Yeah.
I think they brought a whole new audience to Resident Evil.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is pretty cool,
Yeah, for sure.
But if you want something that's a little bit closer to the game,
It's closer to the games.
you got to check out the animated movies.
The animated movies.
They're really good.
They're good, yeah. They tend to stick to, the canon more.
Yeah.
They explore those characters, those storylines from the games in more detail.
Yeah.
You see Leon, you see Chris.
Yeah.
The animation's amazing.
I remember when Degeneration came out.
Oh, yeah.
I was blown away by the animation.
It looked so real.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah. And there's also, that Netflix show, Infinite Darkness.
Oh yeah.
Have you seen that one?
Yeah. I've seen a couple episodes. It's cool. It's like a
spy thriller.
yeah. It's got a little bit more of
A different tone.
yeah.
But it's cool. It's Leon and Claire.
Yeah.
It takes place a few years after RE4.
Yeah, the animation's good in that one too.
It's really good. Netflix, they seem to be doing a lot of video game stuff lately.
They are.
They did that live-action Resident Evil show too, but I don't know.
Oh,
That one was kind of...
Yeah, I heard it wasn't great.
It wasn't as good.
Yeah.
It kind of went in a different direction.
Yeah, I think it's tough, to adapt a video game into a live action show.
It's hard.
It's hard, yeah.
You got to find that balance between staying true to the source material
Right.
and also, making it work as a show.
Right. Yeah.
It's tricky.
Yeah, but it's not just the screen, right? We've got novels, we've got comics.
Oh, yeah, we got the whole expanded universe.
Yeah.
If you want to really dive deep into the lore,
Yeah.
check out the novels by S.T. Perry.
Oh, yeah.
They're awesome.
They really flesh out the backstories of
Yeah.
the characters. They tell you more about Umbrella.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
It's like they're filling in the gaps from the games,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't forget about the comics.
Comics, yeah.
There's been a lot of different comic book series over the years.
Yeah, I've seen some of them.
Each one has its own take on the Resident Evil universe.
Yeah.
But it's really cool to see how big this thing is,
It's great. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. You see Resident Evil stuff everywhere.
Yeah. I went to the store the other day and I saw a Resident Evil energy drink. I
Wow.
was like, what? What is going on?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But it just shows you how much of an impact it's had.
Yeah.
Not just on games,
Yeah.
but on pop culture, in general.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is what it's done for survival horror as a genre.
Oh, absolutely.
Along with Silent Hill and stuff. It really defined it.
Yeah.
It set the standard for the atmosphere, the resource management, those jump scares.
Oh, yeah.
You can see its influence in so many games today.
Yeah, like Last of Us.
Last of Us, Dead Space.
Even
Newer games like Outlast and The Evil Within.
Yeah.
They all owe something to Resident Evil.
Yeah, for
It
sure.
really paved the way.
Yeah. And we can't forget about what it did for zombies in pop culture.
Oh yeah, the zombies.
Zombies were kind of
They were around, but
they were around, but they weren't cool.
they weren't cool.
Yeah.
Resident Evil made them cool again.
Yeah.
It's it brought them back to the mainstream.
And it made them scary again.
Scary again.
Yeah. It's crazy to think that one series had that much of an impact,
It's huge, and not just the cultural impact,
Right.
It's gotten a lot of critical acclaim too.
Oh, yeah.
It's won awards. Resident Evil 4 is considered by many to be one of the best games ever made.
I see that game on top 10 lists all the time.
All the time.
And it deserves it, I think,
It's a fantastic game.
It's a great game.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot.
We have. We've gone through a lot.
Yeah, we talked about the origins,
The evolution.
the different media. It's
Yeah, it's a lot, but it's a really interesting franchise because it's managed to stay relevant
yeah.
for so long and keep changing.
Keep evolving.
But it's still, like you said, it's still got that DNA.
It still feels like Resident Evil.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's important to say, too, that it's not just about entertainment.
No, it's more than that.
There are some, like, deeper themes in there.
Deeper themes.
That make you think,
It makes you think about, like, ethics.
Yeah.
And what corporations are doing.
Yeah.
And the consequences of scientific progress.
Yeah, it's like a warning. It is a little bit of a warning.
Yeah.
It's like they took our anxieties about, technology and corporations and all that stuff,
Right.
and they put it in this zombie-filled world.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, hey, this could happen.
It could. It makes you wonder, like, if there was a zombie outbreak,
Oh, my God.
would we be ready?
I don't think so.
I don't know. Would we end up like Raccoon City?
Probably.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. But at least we've got the games, right?
Yeah, at least we can practice.
We can practice. Yeah.
Learn what not to do.
Figure out where the safe houses are.
Exactly. It's like a survival guide
Yeah.
hidden in a video game.
Yeah. Yeah. But, all jokes aside, I think what really makes Resident Evil special
Mm-hmm.
is that it connects with you on an emotional level.
Oh, yeah.
You care about these characters.
You do.
And you see them go through all this stuff.
You root for them.
Yeah.
You feel bad when bad things happen to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes you think, like, if I was in that situation,
Yeah.
would I have the guts to keep going?
It's a test.
It's a test. Yeah.
Like, what would you do in that situation?
Yeah.
It's like a thought experiment.
Yeah, for sure.
Playing out in this crazy, scary world.
And that's why I think it has resonated with so many people for so long.
Yeah.
It's not just about, escaping for a little while.
It's about something more.
Yeah,
It's about confronting your fears.
Yeah.
Exploring, what it means to be human and figuring out how to survive.
Yeah.
Both in the game and in real life.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a trip, man. It really makes you think. But, it's not all doom and gloom.
Right.
There's a lot of depth to Resident Evil. You've got the stories, the characters, these themes that really make you think about things.
Yeah. I mean, it really makes you think about the world,
Yeah.
like where are the lines when it comes to science? Like, how far is too far?
Right.
And how do we balance all the amazing things we can do
Yeah.
with being responsible?
Right.
It's something we got to think about, like, even more these days,
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. It's like they're showing us this messed up version of our own world
Yeah.
and saying, like, hey, this is what could happen.
Yeah, be careful.
Be careful, right? I
But-
mean, it makes you wonder, like, if a zombie outbreak did happen,
Uh-oh.
would we be ready?
I don't think so.
I don't know, man. Would we end up at, like, Raccoon City?
Oh, I hope not.
Yeah. But hey, at least we have the games to practice with.
Yeah, that's right.
We can learn what not to do.
Exactly. We can learn from their mistakes.
Yeah. We can figure out where the safe houses are.
Find the best weapons.
Yeah. It's like a survival guide for the zombie apocalypse, but it's a video game.
Exactly.
But, all jokes aside, I think what really makes Resident Evil so powerful is that it makes you feel stuff.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You care about these characters, you root for them, and when bad things happen, you really feel it.
It gets to you.
Yeah.
That's what good stories do, right?
Yeah.
They make you feel things, even when it's all scary and crazy, like Resident Evil.
Yeah.
There's still that human element there.
Yeah, it's like even when everything's going wrong, there's still hope.
Exactly.
And it shows how strong people can be when they work together.
Yeah. That's important.
And it makes you think, like, if I was in that situation, would I be brave enough?
Would you fight?
Would I fight? Yeah.
Or would you run?
Would I run? Yeah. It's like a test almost.
It is. It's like, what would you do? How would you react?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why people keep coming back to it. It's
Yeah.
not just a fun game. It's something more.
It makes you think about who you are.
It makes you think about who you are. Yeah.
Yeah.
So after going on this deep dive into Resident Evil, what do you think is the most interesting thing about it?
That's a tough one. I think what gets me is how they've managed to keep changing things up.
Yeah.
Trying different kinds of gameplay, different stories, even different kinds of horror.
Uh-huh.
But they always stay true to what Resident Evil is.
Right.
And that's amazing to me. It shows how creative the people making these games are,
Yeah.
It makes me excited for what they come up with next.
Yeah, it's like we started with those fixed cameras. You couldn't even move properly.
Right.
Then we went to over the shoulder. Now we're in first
And
person.
I know. What's next?
What's next? VR zombies.
Maybe.
Some interactive movie thing.
Could be.
The possibilities are endless.
Yeah. I'm ready for whatever they throw at us.
Yeah, me too. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into Resident Evil.
All right.
I hope you learned something new.
Yeah.
And maybe rediscovered your love for this amazing franchise.
It's a classic for a reason.
Yeah, it really is. It's had a huge impact on games, on pop culture, and it's not going away anytime soon.
And remember, it's not just about the zombies and the scares.
Yeah.
It's about us, you know? It's about what we would do in these crazy situations.
It's about the choices we make.
Exactly.
And how those choices can make all the difference.
So be careful out there.
Yeah, so be vigilant, conserve your ammo, and never let your guard down.
And if you hear something go bump in the night, don't go investigate alone.
Yeah, bring a friend with a shotgun.
Always a good idea.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on this terrifying and exciting journey through the world of Resident Evil.
It's been a blast.
Until next time, stay safe out there. And sweet dreams. All right, buckle up, everyone, because we're diving headfirst into a world overrun by infected, but not the kind you might be used to. These infected, they don't lumber, they sprint.
That's right. We're talking about the pulse-pounding world of the 28 Days Later franchise.
And let me tell you, this deep dive will take us beyond just the two films. We're exploring the planned sequel, the comic series, and the whole impact this franchise has had on, well, pretty much everything zombie-related.
We're talking a total game changer.
So imagine this, 2002, London,
Yeah.
empty, deserted, eerie,
It's like the city's holding its breath.
no traffic, no crowds, just this unsettling quiet.
And that's where 28 Days Later drops us. A civilization on its knees, all thanks to the rage virus.
And man, talk about setting the scene.
Yeah.
Director Danny Boyle working with Alex Garland's script.
Yeah, they use that emptiness brilliantly. Every shadow, every abandoned double-decker bus feels like it's hiding something.
Or someone. And speaking of someone, let's talk about these infected. The fast zombies, as they're often called. They really flipped the script, didn't they?
Completely. No more slow, shuffling corpses.
These things are like nightmares, pure rage, moving at warp speed.
That's the brilliance of it. They're not undead, they're infected. Humans twisted by the virus, every action driven by pure, raw aggression.
Not just flesh-eating. It's like watching humanity itself unravel.
Exactly. The thin line between civilization and savagery. Gone.
Makes you think, what would happen if our world lost that control, that thin veneer of order?
It's a question at the heart of the film, and it's what elevates 28 Days Later beyond a typical zombie flick.
It's a terrifying exploration of what happens when humans are pushed to their absolute limit.
Under extreme pressure, who are we really?
And the way the film was shot, too. That raw, almost documentary-like feel.
Yeah, the digital cinematography was groundbreaking for the time.
It's like you're right there with them, experiencing the chaos firsthand.
Adds to that sense of immediacy. This could happen.
Okay, so the first film really set the bar high. Introduced the world to these fast zombies. Left everyone on the edge of their seats. But then, in 2007, we got the sequel, 28 weeks later.
A shift in focus this time. It seems like the immediate threat is contained. The U.S. military is trying to reestablish some kind of order.
They're setting up a safe zone in London.
Trying to piece things back together.
But of course, nothing goes smoothly, does it? It's almost like a punch to the gut, just when you thought there might be some hope.
It's definitely a darker, more cynical take on the same world. We see the consequences of military intervention, the ethical dilemmas, the fact that that sense of security is so fragile.
And Juan Carlos Fresnadillo takes over as director. The style evolves, too. Still that raw energy, but we're seeing more large-scale action sequences.
It's not just about surviving the infected, it's about surviving the attempts to rebuild. The clash between order and chaos, the trauma of what's been lost.
And the virus itself takes on a whole new meaning, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just a physical threat, it becomes like a symbol.
A symbol of the damage, the potential for things to erupt again.
Like the wounds haven't healed? Not really.
Think of it this way. The rage virus is a metaphor for the scars of conflict, the rage that can simmer beneath the surface.
So we've got these two incredibly impactful films, pushing boundaries, exploring the dark side of human nature. And of course, that leads to the big question. What about 28 months later? Will it ever see the light of day?
That is the question, isn't it? Danny Boyle has hinted over the years, little breadcrumbs here and there.
The rumor mill's been churning. Some say it'll expand the scope. Look at how the virus has hit the rest of the world.
And that opens up so many possibilities, doesn't it? How would different cultures react? Different survival strategies? Would the infected even be the same everywhere?
Another idea floating around is a time jump. Years, maybe decades, after the first two films.
Now that's interesting, seeing how humanity has adapted or maybe failed to adapt. Would there be any civilization left? Or something entirely new built from the ashes?
It's fertile ground for storytelling, that's for sure. And with Danny Boyle's vision, well, the possibilities are pretty much endless.
But here's the thing. A third film would have a lot to live up to. A lot of expectations.
It couldn't just be a rehash.
Exactly. It would need to offer something new, push the franchise forward while honoring what came before.
Maybe that's why we haven't seen it yet. Maybe Boyle's waiting for the perfect story, the right moment.
Finding that balance between honoring the legacy and breaking new ground, it's not easy.
But while we wait and hope for that third film, the 28 Days Later story does continue in the comic series.
And these comics, they're not just some cheap cash-in. They actually add to the story, delve deeper into the lore.
They answer some of those questions the films left hanging.
Right, like the origins of the rage virus itself, how it was created, who was behind it.
A chain of events that led to, well, the end of the world as they knew it.
It's fascinating, adds a whole new layer of complexity. We see the human element, the mistakes, the hubris that might have led to this global catastrophe.
And the comics expand the world beyond the UK, too. We see how other countries are coping.
New survival stories, new struggles, different cultures facing this global threat.
It's almost like the comics are keeping the flame alive, keeping fans engaged while we wait for that potential third film.
Maybe even planting seeds for future stories.
So we've covered a lot of ground, those groundbreaking, fast zombies, that chilling atmosphere, the mystery of 28 months later. But there's one more thing I want to touch on before we go any further, the social commentary.
That's where things get really interesting. This franchise is about so much more than just zombie horror.
Right, it makes you think about real-world anxieties, pandemics, societal unrest, about how fragile everything really is.
It's like they're holding up a mirror to our own fears.
The rage virus itself, it can be seen as a metaphor for so many things. Loss of control, descent into chaos, the potential for violence that's always there, lurking beneath the surface.
And it's not just the virus. The films explore government control, the way information is used, the erosion of trust in authority.
And it's chilling how relevant that all feels today, isn't it?
Right. We're bombarded with information, the truth gets twisted, political divisions everywhere. Sometimes it feels like we're just a step away from, well, something like this happening.
It's that echo of reality that makes 28 Days Later so unsettling, so thought-provoking.
Yeah.
Makes us confront our own vulnerability.
And our own fears about where the world's heading.
All right, so that wraps up part one of our deep dive into the 28 Days Later franchise.
But we're just getting started. In part two, we'll take a closer look at the infected themselves, those terrifying, fast zombies that have become so iconic. What makes them tick? What makes them so unique and disturbing?
And we'll delve even deeper into the social commentary, explore how the films reflect our anxieties about the world around us, and those unsettling truths they reveal about human nature.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the 28 Days Later franchise. Ready to get back into the thick of it?
Absolutely. Let's talk about what really sets this franchise apart.
Yeah.
Those terrifying infected.
Yeah, there's something else, aren't they?
I'm getting chills just thinking about them. Those bloodshot eyes, the way they move, and that rage. Pure animalistic rage.
It's a whole different level of fear compared to the classic slow-moving zombies.
Oh yeah, these guys are the real deal.
And the thing is, these infected, they're not mindless corpses. They're living people hijacked by the rage virus. Imagine someone you know, someone you love, suddenly consumed by this uncontrollable fury.
That's what makes it so disturbing, right? It's not just the physical threat, it's that psychological torment. Witnessing that transformation,
It's like seeing the humanity stripped away.
it taps into a primal fear, losing control, becoming something monstrous.
Exactly. The infected, they're like a distorted reflection, showing us how thin the line between civilization and savagery really is.
And the speed, the way they transform, it's terrifying.
One minute they're normal, the next they're lashing out with this ferocity that's, well, almost superhuman.
It's like a switch flips and there's no going back.
And that's what makes it so effective. It creates this constant unease, a paranoia. Anyone could be infected. Anyone could snap at any moment.
You're never really safe.
A hallmark of great horror, that constant tension.
But there's also a sadness to it, a tragedy.
Oh, absolutely. These infected are victims too, trapped in a cycle of rage they can't control.
Remember that scene with Jem and the infected chimpanzee?
In the lab. Yeah, heart-wrenching. It reminds you that this virus, it doesn't discriminate. And the suffering it causes, well, it goes way beyond the physical.
And the way these infected move, it's not like those classic slow-moving zombies.
No, they're sprinting, leaping, almost acrobatic.
It's like a whole new breed of terror.
And it changed everything. Those fast zombies, as they've come to be known, they became a staple of modern horror. World War Z, Train to Busan, all those heart-pounding chase scenes, it all traces back to 28 days later.
It's like they tapped into something primal. That fear of being hunted, of something relentless and unstoppable coming after you.
And it's not just about surviving the initial attack. It's that constant threat of pursuit, the feeling that you can never truly escape.
Exhausting.
But also exhilarating in a way.
Okay, so we've established that these infected are terrifying. Physically, psychologically, the whole package. But what about 28 months later? That's the question that keeps coming up.
Will we ever see that third film? It's the million-dollar question. And who knows? Danny Boyle has said he's interested, but he's a busy guy.
But you'd think a director of his caliber, he wouldn't just jump back into a franchise for no reason. There'd have to be a story worth telling.
You're right. A third film would need to be more than just a cash grab. It would have to offer something new, something that pushes the franchise forward while staying true to its core.
Some of the rumors suggest a time jump. Maybe years, even decades after 28 weeks later. What do you think?
Imagine that. Seeing how humanity has adapted. Or maybe how it's completely fallen apart.
Would there even be any civilization left? Or something totally new built from the ashes?
It's exciting to think about. New landscapes, new cultures, all shaped by the virus.
And what about the infected themselves? Would they have evolved too?
Maybe the virus mutated, creating new, even more terrifying threats.
The possibilities are endless. But it all comes down to the story.
Exactly. And with a franchise like this, the expectations are sky high.
So while we wait and hope, let's talk about those 28 Days Later comics.
They're a goldmine for fans, expanding the story, filling in the gaps.
They delve into everything, from the origins of the virus to the global impact.
And they answer those lingering questions from the films.
Like, where did this rage virus come from? Who unleashed it? Why?
It's fascinating. We see the human error, the arrogance that might have led to this global catastrophe.
And the comics introduce new characters, new storylines. We see how the outbreak affected different parts of the world.
New survival strategies, new communities, a wider view of this post-apocalyptic landscape.
It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, even in the face of something so devastating.
And the power of storytelling. The comics keep the 28 Days Later universe alive, even when there's no new film on the horizon.
So we've got these terrifying infected, the potential for a third film, a whole expanded universe in the comics. But there's one more thing we need to talk about. The social commentary.
Ah, yes. The layer that makes this franchise so much more than just entertainment. It's holding up a mirror to our own anxieties, our fears about the world.
And it's not just about zombies. It's about societal collapse, the potential for chaos, those dark impulses that we all have.
It's like the creators tapped into something, a collective unease, and it's more relevant now than ever.
We're living through pandemics, political divisions, information overload. Sometimes it feels like we're right on the edge.
And the rage virus becomes this powerful symbol of what happens when those anxieties explode, when our systems fail, and we're left with nothing but our baser instincts.
It's like watching a worst-case scenario play out on screen.
Think about it. The virus spreads through blood, through touch. It's a visceral representation of how fear and violence can spread, how quickly things can fall apart.
And the films don't shy away from exploring government control, the way information is manipulated, the breakdown of trust.
It's like they're saying, hey, this could happen. This is what we're capable of.
And it's chilling, isn't it? Because we see those same things happening in our world. fake news, political agendas, the erosion of trust.
That's what makes 28 Days Later so unsettling, so thought-provoking. It forces us to confront those uncomfortable truths, to ask ourselves, what if?
What if our world unraveled? Would we rise above it, or would we succumb to the rage?
Those are the questions that linger long after the film ends. And those questions are what make this franchise so much more than just a horror film. It's social commentary, it's a warning, it's a reflection of who we are.
All right, welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into the world of 28 Days Later. We've covered a lot of ground, from those heart-stopping infected to the thought-provoking social commentary.
And of course, the lingering mystery of 28 months later. But now, let's zoom out a bit. Look at the bigger picture.
Right, the legacy.
Yeah.
How has this franchise impacted the world of horror and pop culture in general?
Well, it's huge. 28 Days Later came along at a time when, honestly, the zombie genre was getting a bit stale.
Yeah, it was all kind of same old, same old.
And then, boom, these fast, furious infected hit the scene, and everything changed.
It was like a shot of adrenaline, straight to the heart of the genre.
Exactly. Suddenly, zombies weren't just these slow, shuffling metaphors. They were immediate threats. They could outrun you, outsmart you.
And tear you apart in seconds.
It raised the stakes, big time.
And that impact, it went way beyond horror films.
Oh yeah, it spread like a virus itself.
Video games, novels, TV shows, it's everywhere.
Think about the infected in World War Z, that massive swarm.
Or Train to Busan, all those sprinting zombies.
Even video games like Left 4 Dead owe a debt to 28 Days Later.
Those frantic chases, that feeling of desperately trying to survive, it all goes back to those fast, furious infected.
But it's not just about the speed or the violence. 28 Days Later brought a whole new level of intensity to the genre. A rawness, a realism.
It felt real, like it could actually happen.
Exactly. The shaky cam, the natural lighting, that gritty documentary style, it put you right in the middle of the chaos.
And that approach, it's been hugely influential. It's not just about jump scares anymore. It's about creating this immersive, unsettling experience.
One that gets under your skin, stays with you long after the credits roll.
We've talked about the social commentary in 28 Days Later, but it's worth revisiting in the context of its legacy, I think.
It definitely makes you think.
It's not just entertainment, right?
Right.
It's making a statement, asking questions. And I think that's a big reason why people are still talking about it today.
Oh, absolutely. The film captured something, a specific feeling, a kind of anxiety. Think about when it came out.
Right after 9/11, the world was a different place.
Exactly. There was this sense of uncertainty, of vulnerability, and 28 Days Later, with those images of a deserted London, it tapped into that.
It's what good horror does, isn't it? Takes those fears we have, those anxieties that lurk beneath the surface, and gives them a shape.
Gives them a face.
Allows us to confront those fears, but in a safe way.
In a fictional world, yeah.
Yeah.
And 28 Days Later, it explored those themes of societal collapse, government control, the darkness within us all.
It's almost like it predicted the future in a way. Or at least it tapped into those currents of anxiety that are even stronger now.
Pandemics, political divisions, information overload, it's all there.
And that's why it still feels relevant.
Yeah.
It still feels fresh. It's not just a zombie movie. It's a reflection of us, of our fears, our weaknesses.
Of what we might become if pushed too far.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into 28 Days Later, I'm struck by how powerful storytelling can be.
Absolutely. When it's done right, it can entertain, it can terrify, but it can also make us think, make us question.
And 28 Days Later, it does all of that. It's earned its place as a horror classic, and its legacy will continue to resonate, well, who knows, for how long.
Hopefully we'll get to see where that legacy goes next, maybe with 28 months later.
One can only hope. But even if that third film never materializes, 28 Days Later has left an undeniable mark. It's a reminder that horror at its best can be more than just a genre. It can be a mirror reflecting our own world, our own anxieties, and the darkness that lurks within us all. And that's something worth thinking about, even after the credits roll. Hey everyone, welcome back. I am so pumped for this deep dive because we are tackling a franchise that's near and dear to my heart. It's Return of the Living Dead. And I know you're a big fan of horror comedy, too.
Yeah, definitely.
And this series, it just nails that blend. But we're not just going to, like, sit back and watch the movies.
Right?
We're going deeper.
Absolutely.
Like, behind the scenes, the trivia, the evolution of the franchise, all the little details that make it so special in the world of zombie movies. You know, this franchise, it actually had a huge influence on how we think about zombies today. Like the whole brains thing.
Oh, yeah.
That obsession.
Big time.
You ready for some surprises?
Always am.
Okay, let's do this.
What I find so fascinating about Return of the Living Dead is that it's both a tribute to George Romero, you know.
The OG zombie master.
Exactly, and this total, like, rebellious spin-off. It's like they took Romero's classic zombies, cranked up the energy, injected them with some punk rock attitude, and then just let them loose on the world.
Okay, so first things first, 1985. The original Return of the Living Dead. Romero's zombies were definitely the inspiration. But this movie, it throws a curveball right off the bat. We're not dealing with those slow, lumbering Romero zombies anymore.
Oh, no.
He's undead. They're fast. They're mean.
Oh, yeah.
And get this, they can talk.
It's brilliant. It's like someone took the zombie rule book and just ripped it to shreds.
Right. Yeah. It's like Zombie 2.0.
Totally. And the way they introduced this whole new zombie origin story with that military gas, the trioxin, it's genius because it's not just a random virus, you know?
Okay.
It's a human-made disaster, this toxic gas that accidentally gets released. Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, these reanimated ghouls, they're not just driven by instinct like Romero's zombies. They seem to have this twisted kind of consciousness.
Yeah, they're aware.
Like a dark awareness of what they've become.
Yeah.
And that's where the whole brains thing comes in.
The line that launched 1,000 memes.
Exactly. These zombies, they're not just hungry, you know, they have this specific craving, like they need to consume human brains.
You know, I've always wondered about that.
What? What have you wondered?
If it's more than just a funny line.
Oh, interesting.
Like, is there a deeper meaning?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some kind of social commentary about consumerism.
Yeah.
You know, this insatiable hunger for something that we think will fulfill us, even if it's as gruesome as eating brains.
I love that interpretation.
But maybe I'm overthinking it.
No, I think you're onto something. There's definitely a layer of satire woven into these films, but let's not forget the visual impact. Remember Trash, Linnea Quigley?
Oh, how can you forget Trash?
You're right. She's iconic. And her whole look, that punk rock, rebellious vibe.
Totally.
It's like a visual representation of the film's whole attitude, right?
Right.
From the soundtrack to the characters, it's like a giant middle finger to all the sanitized suburban horror movies of the time.
Oh, yeah. Big time. But here's what I find so interesting about the original Return of the Living Dead. It's like this perfect storm of over-the-top humor.
Right.
And genuine moments of horror.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way they play with the whole fire is the only way to kill rule.
Mm-hmm.
It's genius. It adds this layer of hopelessness. Like no matter how many headshots you land, they just keep coming back. It makes it so much more intense. It almost makes you wonder if it's saying something deeper.
Like what?
Like some kind of societal fear of the unstoppable, you know?
I love that you're thinking about it on that level. Because I think that's what makes the film so brilliant. It works on multiple levels. You can enjoy it for the visceral thrills, but it also leaves you with some food for thought.
Definitely. But before we spiral into an existential crisis, we got to talk about the sequel.
Oh, yes, Part 2.
Return of the Living Dead Part 2, which, let's be honest, went in a very different direction.
It did, 1988's Part 2. It definitely cranks up the slapstick comedy.
Oh.
It's almost cartoonish compared to the original, with some seriously outlandish zombie antics.
You got to admire their boldness, though, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, they could have just tried to replicate the success of the first film.
Yeah.
But they went all in on a totally different vibe.
Right. They took that trioxin-fueled chaos and somehow turned it into something almost whimsical.
And who could forget that reanimated child zombie?
Oh, my gosh. Yeah.
Not exactly terrifying.
Not really.
But definitely memorable.
Oh, for sure.
It's like they weren't afraid to just go for it.
Exactly.
Experiment. Play with expectations.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this franchise so interesting to me.
Yeah.
So we've got the punk rock horror comedy of the original. Then we've got the almost farcical humor of Part 2.
Right.
What comes next? Another wild left turn.
Oh, you have no idea. Return of the Living Dead 3, 1993. That's where things get goth.
Goth zombies.
You bet.
I am intrigued. This is going to be good.
Oh, it is. Buckle up. Yeah, Return of the Living Dead 3, it takes us to a whole different place. It's like they took that raw energy of the first film, but instead of punk rock, it's all gothic imagery and, like, a tragic love story.
Whoa, goth zombies. That's a twist I did not see coming. Did they swap out their leather jackets for velvet capes?
Not quite, but the whole vibe is definitely darker, more intense.
Okay, I'm listening. So we're not laughing anymore.
Well, there's still some dark humor in there, but it's more subtle, more intertwined with the horror.
Gotcha. So what's the story this time?
It's all about this young couple, Kurt and Julie, and their doomed love affair.
That doesn't sound good.
It's not. Julie has this terrible accident, and Kurt, he's desperate to save her. So he gets his hands on some trioxin.
The zombie gas.
Yeah. And he uses it to bring her back.
Oh, no. I think I see where this is going.
Things don't exactly go as planned.
I bet they don't. So instead of the crazy antics of part 2, we're getting a love story gone wrong.
You could say that. It's more like a exploration of what it means to be reanimated, the emotional toll, the psychological impact.
Intense. So Julie's like stuck between life and death.
Exactly. She's battling these newfound cravings, but she's also clinging to her human identity.
And Kurt's got to deal with the fact that, well, that his girlfriend is technically undead.
Right. It's a pretty heavy situation.
It's like a zombie Romeo and Juliet, but with a lot more brains.
You got it. But let's get back to those gothic elements you mentioned.
Oh, yeah, the goth vibes.
The film is full of these dark, atmospheric visuals, like shadowy cemeteries, crumbling buildings, a constant sense of melancholy,
I can almost feel the fog rolling in.
Exactly. And then there's Julie's transformation. Her body, it becomes more and more grotesque as the trioxin takes over.
That's got to be tough to watch.
It is, but there's also this strange beauty to it, like a macabre elegance.
Wow, okay, they really went all in on the gothic thing. So they took the zombie concept.
Yeah.
And they basically gave it a gothic makeover.
Pretty much. They infused the horror with this whole new aesthetic.
It sounds visually stunning, even if it's a little morbid. But come on, this is Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
I doubt it's all gloom and doom.
Right. There's still that dark humor that runs through the franchise, but it's definitely more subtle, more nuanced.
It's fascinating how they managed to reinvent the franchise with each film. Punk rock, slapstick, goth. They really weren't afraid to experiment.
Not at all.
But you know what they say? All good things must come to an end. Or at least, transition to direct-to-video.
Yes. That brings us to Necropolis and Rave to the Grave.
The sequels that time forgot.
Maybe I forgot. But they definitely didn't reach the same heights as the first 3 films.
Yeah, Necropolis. It felt like they were trying to, cash in on the whole government conspiracy thing.
Interesting take.
It takes place in this creepy medical facility in Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
And of course, they're experimenting with trioxin.
Naturally.
But the zombies, they're not the fast-talking, brain-hungry ghouls we're used to.
Yeah, they went back to the more traditional, slow-moving, menacing zombies.
It's almost like they lost sight of what made the franchise so unique. They tried to make it more realistic, but they kind of sacrificed the humor and the social commentary.
Right, and the over-the-top energy.
Exactly. Then we have Rave to the Grave.
Oh, yeah.
Which, the title kind of says it all.
It does.
They were trying to tap into that early 2000s rave culture.
Right. It felt a little desperate.
Yeah, like they were chasing trends instead of sticking to what made the franchise great in the first place.
I agree. It lacked that spark of originality, that willingness to push boundaries.
And the humor, it just felt forced.
Yeah. The scares were predictable, and the connection to the earlier films, it felt really weak.
Like they forgot how to have fun with the concept.
It's a shame. Because even with their flaws, these later entries show how much potential there is in the Return to the Living Dead world.
There's something about those fast-talking, brain-hungry zombies that just keeps people coming back for more.
Absolutely. And I think that speaks volumes about the legacy of the entire franchise.
Okay, so we've seen the rise of Return of the Living Dead, the experimentation, the maybe not so great sequels.
It's been a journey.
But its influence goes way beyond those individual movies, would you say?
Absolutely. Return of the Living Dead. It didn't just make some entertaining movies. It actually changed how we think about zombies, even today.
It's like they gave zombies a personality makeover.
I love that.
They went from mindless monsters to these witty, self-aware creatures with a taste for brains that went beyond just basic hunger.
Exactly. The brains line, it's instantly recognizable, even for people who've never seen the movies. And those expressive, almost comical zombie faces, they've become a staple of the genre. You see their influence everywhere. Video games, comic books, even Halloween costumes.
It's a reminder that even in a genre as crowded as the zombie apocalypse, there's always room for originality. and a good dose of dark humor. But what I find really interesting is how the franchise created such a distinct visual style.
Oh.
That blend of punk rock aesthetics, gritty practical effects, and those unforgettable character designs, especially in those early films. It really set them apart.
You're so right. It wasn't just the zombies that were unique. It was the whole world they inhabited. The costumes, the music, the attitude. It was like a rebellion against all that clean-cut horror. It was raw, unapologetic, a celebration of the grotesque.
And that visual language, that rebellious energy, it's still inspiring artists and creators today.
For sure.
So, yeah, maybe Return of the Living Dead didn't always hit it out of the park, but its legacy is undeniable. It's a testament to the power of taking risks and the enduring appeal of a good, brain-hungry zombie story told with a wink and a smile.
But before we close the coffin on this deep dive,
There's one last brain-tickling question we need to address. We've really gone deep, haven't we?
all right.
With the Return of the Living Dead from those early punk rock days to that goth phase, even those direct-to-video sequels.
Yeah, it's been quite the ride.
And we talked about how much it changed the whole zombie genre. But here's something I've been thinking about. The way the franchise evolved, especially how those later films got more serious.
Less humor.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that, says something about how zombie stories are told today? Like a bigger trend?
That's a really interesting question, because you're right. The original Return of the Living Dead, it was a horror comedy at heart. They embraced the absurdity of it all.
Yeah.
Scares and laughs all mixed together.
Totally. But then as we went through the sequels, especially Necropolis and Rave to the Grave, it's like they lost that comedic edge. Like they forgot how to laugh at themselves a little.
Right, like they traded in their punk rock spirit for a more generic zombie formula.
Exactly. And it makes me wonder if that's happening in zombie movies overall. Like, think about Romero's classics. They weren't just scary. They had something to say, you know? They used zombies as a metaphor for all kinds of stuff. Consumerism, societal anxiety.
Oh, absolutely.
It made you think.
While you were getting the chills. But then, as zombie movies got super popular, it feels like the focus shifted more towards action survival. Just pure thrills.
Yeah.
Like the deeper meaning got kind of lost along the way.
You could say that it became more about outsmarting the hordes than, using zombies to explore bigger ideas.
It's almost like the fun, satirical side got left behind.
Maybe. And maybe it's because audiences changed. Maybe people just wanted more intense, action-packed experiences.
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe it's a sign of the times, you know?
How so?
Like maybe the world feels so crazy these days that we're not as inclined to laugh at the absurdity of it all.
Because the absurdity feels a little too real.
Exactly. Wow, that got deep fast.
Uh-huh. Well, that's what deep dives are for, right?
That's true. So for everyone listening, as you keep exploring those zombie movies out there, think about that balance between humor and horror. What speaks to you more? Do you want those pure adrenaline rushes? Or do you like stories that make you think while they're creeping you out?
It's an interesting thing to consider.
There's no right or wrong answer. But it's worth thinking about as you navigate that ever-growing world of zombie cinema.
It is, and who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe the next generation of zombie films will bring back that blend of horror and humor that Return of the Living Dead did so well.
I hope so, because that's a recipe for zombie gold, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But until then, sleep tight, everyone, and maybe keep a fire extinguisher handy just in case.
Always good advice. All right, so get ready, because today we are going to dive into a world full of zombies, but with a twist.
Yeah.
We are talking all about the Zombieland franchise, those movies, and even the animated series.
Oh, yeah.
You know how they somehow made zombies absolutely hilarious?
Right.
So you've seen the movies, right? Maybe you've even seen the animated show.
Yeah.
But today we're going way beyond just talking about what happened in the plot. We're going deep. We're digging into why the Zombieland thing became more than just another zombie movie.
Well, I think one of the things that's really interesting about this franchise is that it brings humor and heart into something that's usually really bleak.
Right.
It's not just surviving the zombies, you know?
Yeah.
It's the connections that are forged in all the chaos and how laughing can be just as good of a weapon as a shotgun.
Absolutely. So let's go way back to the beginning.
Okay.
With the first movie, Zombieland, back in 2009. And we meet those four main characters that are trying to, deal with this whole post-apocalyptic thing.
Uh-huh.
Columbus, who's like super anxious and has like a rule for everything.
Yeah.
Tallahassee, who loves his Twinkies and is
Yeah.
just like total badass.
He does.
And then there's those clever sisters, Wichita and Little Rock.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting is how these characters, they're thrown together, by chance, by fate, by circumstance,
Oh, yeah.
and they become like this messed up, weird, family.
Exactly.
It's pretty fascinating.
And, the film uses humor really well to explore some dark themes.
Right.
Being eaten is always a threat, right?
Yeah.
But they're still, joking and bonding over junk food like Twinkies.
Yeah.
That's what makes this so unique.
It's true. And those survival rules like, cardio
Right.
and double tap, they're not just like funny little things,
Right.
They give the film a structure
Yeah.
and they become part of what makes this franchise so recognizable.
And it's a way for the audience to really, feel like they're part of it too.
Yeah.
Like they're saying, hey, you could survive this, just, double tap.
Uh-huh.
It almost makes the whole zombie thing, doable.
Almost. But would you say that there's something more to those rules, like double tap? I mean, on the surface, yeah, it's making sure the zombie's dead, right?
Right.
But it also, kind of hints at something about these characters,
Right.
like their anxieties, and their need to control stuff when everything's gone crazy.
Yeah. You're totally right. It's like this theme of overcompensation.
Yeah.
These characters, especially Columbus, they're dealing with all this insecurity.
Right.
And it comes out in these like, super careful survival plans.
Oh, that's a great point. So it's not just about killing zombies, it's about killing, your inner demons, too.
Right, exactly.
Wow. And speaking of things that make you anxious, let's not forget how the movie makes fun of all those classic zombie tropes. Like, suddenly, other humans are just as bad as the undead.
Yeah, maybe even worse.
Yeah.
It's like they're saying that even with this huge disaster happening,
Yeah.
people being selfish and greedy is the scariest part.
Totally. And of course, we can't talk about Zombieland without mentioning Bill Murray, right?
Right, yeah.
His cameo is legendary, and it's genius, because it plays on what we expect to see from, famous people in movies. Like, it adds this whole other level to the movie, Do you think the filmmakers knew how big that cameo would be?
I think having that cameo in there shows how self-aware the movie is.
Right.
It's like a wink at the audience, like, hey, we know this is crazy,
Yeah.
but we're still going to scare you.
Totally. It became one of those, you had to be there pop culture moments.
Right.
The movie was a huge hit, right?
Oh, yeah.
It brought new life to zombie movies and showed that even in a zombie apocalypse, there's room for some laughs. But the story doesn't end there, right? 10 years later, we get Zombieland, double tap, and things are different, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. I mean, a decade later, the whole world of Zombieland has changed. Like, literally.
Right.
It's not just your, normal zombies anymore.
Yeah.
They've changed. They're faster. They're stronger. And, way harder to kill.
Right.
Why did they do that? I think it's because zombie movies themselves were changing.
Mm-hmm.
After The Walking Dead, people weren't scared of the slow zombies anymore.
Right. So it's like the filmmakers were like, okay, you think you've seen it all. Not even close. But those super zombies weren't the only things that changed, right? We got new groups of survivors.
Right.
Like, some of them are just chilling in the White House. It's wild. The sequel took everything that was awesome about the first movie and just cranked it way up.
Yeah.
But even with all that craziness going on, there's a deeper look at the characters, don't you think?
Totally.
Oh.
Look at Tallahassee and Little Rock.
Yeah.
She wants to be independent, and he's super overprotective.
Right.
It makes the sequel more than just a bigger, louder version of the first one.
Exactly. It's not just about killing zombies anymore, right? It's
Mhm.
about these characters dealing with their own problems and changing as the world around them changes.
Yeah.
And that brings us to something really important. The double tap rule, it becomes like a metaphor in the sequel.
Okay.
It's not just about making sure a zombie is dead. It's about changing up the times, facing your fears, and, taking another shot at life.
It's like They connected the action to what's going on in the characters' hearts.
Yeah.
Just like they got to double cap the zombies. They got to like look at their relationships, what they want,
Yeah.
who they want to be in this crazy world.
And people loved it, right? Double Tap was another huge success. It showed that Zombieland wasn't just a one-time thing. But there's one more piece of the Zombieland puzzle, right? The animated series. Now, I know you might be thinking, an animated zombie comedy. But before you, write it off, this series came out in 2013.
Right.
And it gave us a whole new way to see the world of Zombieland.
Yeah.
It picked up right after the first movie, and even though it wasn't as big as the movies, it added something new to the franchise.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the animated series let the creators, really dive into who these characters are and how they're connected.
Yeah.
They showed their weaknesses and fears in a way that the movies couldn't really do.
It's cool to see how they did those deeper themes with animation. But it also felt like they were trying things out, you know?
Yeah.
Like seeing how far they could push the Zombieland world.
And that's important. It shows that they weren't just going to, sit back and relax.
Right.
They wanted to try new stuff and find new ways to tell the story. And even though the animated series didn't last that long, it helped the franchise grow in other ways, which we'll get into later. But for now, let's think about why Zombieland was so popular in the first place. What makes it different from all the other zombie movies out there?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a great question.
One of the things that really makes Zombieland stand out is how it brought back zombie comedies.
Yeah.
Before Zombieland, zombie movies were all about being scary.
Yeah.
Gore and scares and just trying to survive,
Yeah, it's true. You never saw a zombie movie that wasn't super serious.
Right.
But then Zombieland came along and just totally changed that,
Yeah.
It showed that you could have crazy action and scary zombies and still make jokes about it all.
Right. It reminded everyone that laughing can be a good thing. Even when the world is ending.
Yeah.
And because of that, we got other zombie comedies like Shaun of the Dead and Warm Bodies.
Oh, yeah, I love those.
They both mix humor and horror really well.
It's like Zombieland said, hey, it's okay to have fun with this stuff.
Totally.
And it wasn't just movies either. Even shows like The Walking Dead, they're more serious for sure.
Right.
But they still had funny moments.
Yeah, especially in the early seasons.
You can see how Zombieland changed things.
Yeah.
Like how those characters connect with each other even when everything is going wrong.
That's another big reason why people love Zombieland.
Yeah.
It's got those great characters.
Oh, yeah. Columbus, Tallahassee, Wichita, Little Rock.
Right.
They're not just boring zombie killers.
Yeah, they feel real.
They've got their own personalities and stuff.
And they work so well together.
Like a crazy family.
Exactly. It's hilarious and heartwarming all at the same time.
And the actors are great together, too.
Oh, yeah. The chemistry is amazing.
And the writers gave each character, a unique voice. Yeah.
You've got Columbus, who's all nervous and loves rules.
Right.
Tallahassee, who's tough, but, you love him. Wichita, who's smart and can handle anything.
Yeah.
And Little Rock, the teenager, just trying to figure things out.
It's crazy.
It's like you're not just watching a zombie movie.
Yeah.
You're watching a story about family and how those connections help us survive.
And what's amazing is that it does all that without forgetting about the scary stuff.
Right. It's the perfect mix of funny, scary, and heartwarming.
But there's one more thing we got to talk about.
What's that?
All the pop culture references and satire.
Oh, yeah. Zombieland is full of those little nods to other movies and shows.
It's like a game trying to spot them all.
The writers are totally in tune with what's popular.
Yeah.
They use it to make jokes and say something about the world.
Like Tallahassee's obsession with Twinkies.
Right. It's not just a random thing.
Yeah.
It's making fun of how much we love stuff.
Okay. Yeah, at first I thought that was kind of cheesy. But now that you mention it, it does make you think.
It makes you wonder what's really important.
Yeah, like when everything is falling apart, what do we hold on to?
Exactly. That's what makes Zombieland more than just a fun movie.
And then there's the Bill Murray cameo.
Oh, man, that was brilliant.
It's so unexpected and hilarious.
It shows how Zombieland isn't afraid to break the rules.
Yeah, and have fun with it all.
But it also shows how good Zombieland is at creating those iconic moments.
Right, like things people say all the time.
Like double tap.
Yeah, everyone says that now.
It doesn't even have to be about zombies anymore.
Right, it's just part of how we talk now.
It's amazing how those little things from the movie have stuck with us.
It shows how much of an impact Zombieland has had.
It's not just entertainment. It's become part of our culture.
Yeah, Zombieland has shown that even a zombie comedy can be important.
It can change a genre and give us things to say that we remember forever.
So we've talked about what makes Zombieland special, how it's influenced things, and why people still love it.
Right.
But what about the future of Zombieland?
Oh, yeah. Where could it go from here?
It's a good question with how popular it still is.
Especially after Double Tap.
There's definitely room for more Zombieland.
People are talking about a third movie.
Yeah, and the actors and filmmakers seem interested.
It could really happen.
Can you imagine?
New zombies, new places to explore.
Maybe even more backstory on the characters?
Like, what about a prequel about Tallahassee?
Oh, yeah, before the zombies.
Showing how he became such a badass.
That would be awesome.
People would love that.
But we could also have spin-offs about other characters.
Oh, yeah. Like, what about Wichita and Little Rock?
Right when the zombies first started.
Showing how they learned to survive and how their relationship grew.
Like a serious drama, but with that Zombieland humor.
That would be so cool.
And why stop at live action?
Right.
We could have video games, comic books.
Another animated series.
Maybe one that's a little more grown-up this time.
And don't forget theme parks.
Oh, man.
Imagine being in the world of Zombieland.
Dodging zombies, testing your survival skill.
The possibilities are endless.
Zombieland could be way more than just movies,
It could be a whole experience.
giving fans new ways to enjoy it.
With all the fans, the creative potential.
And those big themes of survival humor and connection.
The future of Zombieland is looking pretty good.
But before we get too carried away, let's bring it back to you, the listener.
Yeah. What do you think makes Zombieland so great?
What are your hopes for its future?
We want to hear your thoughts.
Just share your theories, your dream spin-offs, your favorite Zombieland moments.
Use the hashtag #DeepDiveZombieland.
But we're not done yet. Stick with us.
As we wrap up this deep dive with some final thoughts on the whole Zombieland phenomenon.
And what it all means. All right, welcome back to the show. We've talked all about that crazy world of Zombieland, you know, from those funny beginnings to how it's changed things. And we even thought about what might happen next.
Yeah.
But as we wrap up this deep dive, let's just take a second to really think about why this franchise is so, so special.
I think what's so cool about Zombieland is that it works on so many levels. Like, it's exciting, it's funny,
Right.
it's got those characters you care about, and it makes you think about stuff all at the same time.
Right.
It's really smart and entertaining.
Yeah, and you don't see that a lot, especially in a zombie comedy, right?
Exactly.
Zombieland isn't just about, killing zombies for fun. The characters have depth,
Right.
and they deal with real stuff.
Right.
Yeah, they want to survive, but it's also about finding people you care about, finding something to believe in,
Right.
and even finding hope when everything seems hopeless.
And it does all that while still surprising you.
Yeah.
Just when you think you know what's coming next, boom, something totally unexpected happens. Like a cameo, a funny line, or even a really touching moment right in the middle of all the chaos.
It's true. It's like the filmmakers are in on the joke, They're like winking at us, but they're still giving us those scary and exciting moments.
Yeah.
It reminds us that even when things are really bad, laughing can help. Maybe even more than a shotgun.
Maybe that's the biggest thing we learned from Zombieland. Don't take things too seriously, even a zombie apocalypse. But underneath all the jokes and action, Zombieland makes us think about some big stuff.
Yeah.
Like, what really matters when everything falls apart? What are we willing to fight for? Who are we willing to protect?
Those are good questions for anyone to ask, even if there aren't any zombies around.
Right.
Zombieland shows us that even when things are crazy and you feel like giving up, human connection, caring about others, even love can still exist.
And that's a message that goes beyond just this movie. It's what makes Zombieland stick with you.
So as we finish up our Zombieland deep dive, we have one last question for you. What is it about Zombieland that you connect with? Is it the humor that catches you off guard? The action that gets your heart racing? Those characters you can relate to?
Yeah.
Or maybe it's how it uses the zombie apocalypse to talk about bigger things, about what it means to be human and where we fit in the world.
Whatever it is that draws you to Zombieland, we hope this deep dive has given you a new appreciation for this awesome franchise. It's got laughs, it's got excitement, and believe it or not, it's got heart.
Zombieland proves that stories can be powerful, and even in a zombie apocalypse, there's still room for laughter, connection, and maybe even a Twinkie or two. So that's it for our Zombieland deep dive, folks. Until next time, stay sharp, keep those weapons handy, and remember, double tap.